kind of borrowed it. I heard this man on TikTok, he mentioned what we're going to talk about tonight, and he used the phrase, insight over eyesight. And this is on the story of blind Bartimaeus. And it's a short story, and, we started late, so I won't keep you guys too long. It's only several verses long, but man, it's a whole lesson in itself. So if you turn into Mark chapter 8, it's verse 46 through 52. Mark 8, 46 through 52. And let's just read it first, and then we'll come back to it. And it says, now there came to Jericho, as he went out of Jericho with his disciples. Of course, this is Jesus, right? Oh, I'm sorry. It's 10. Mark 10. Sorry about that. Verify that that's correct. I put this after we got home last night from a couples banquet, and I started writing. It's like, man, sometimes when you get in the zone, and it's like, man, I started going page by, I started doing all these pages, and then this afternoon I was like, okay, I'm going to retype all that, and it's like, oh man, it's a lot of work. And as I'm going through my notes, and it's like, man, I missed words here, and because you're going so fast, it's like, oh wait, that's not right, it's like, so yes, it's Mark 10. And this is the story of blind Bartimaeus. Right. And this is Jesus traveling through Jericho. Now there came to Jericho, as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude. Blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat at the road begging. And when he had heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, what do you want me to do? The blind man said to him, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Then Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight. So that's the whole story that we're looking at. So let me get organized here. So we start off with Jesus coming through Jericho. Now this is just 10 days before the crucifixion. 10 days. That's amazing. That he's coming through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. And earlier in the chapter, he visited a rich man named Zacchaeus. Remember Zacchaeus, little Zacchaeus, who was in the tree wanting to see Jesus? And he went into his house. And that story just goes to show how God is not, what does that say? A respecter of men, that was the word, respecter of men. From rich men to poor men, he helps both, all are his children. He doesn't judge us by how much we have or by how little we have. And this is a good illustration of a man who had nothing. Bartimaeus, being disabled in that culture, he didn't have the ability to work. And that was a very hands-on, vocational kind of culture, agricultural. You're either a farmer, shepherd, blacksmith, you did something with your hands. And being blind restricted him from, having a living in a sense. His only means of survival was sitting by the road, asking others for alms, handouts. But as we see in the story, he was no dummy. He, he sat on the side of the road asking for money. So we know he was at a very low point in his life, desperate, no really hope in the future, for his future. And notice where the people are, he's always where people is because that's his best chance for collecting alms, right? So being blind, scientists say your other senses are magnified. So his hearing must have been magnified. So he could hear people. That's going to be important in this story. And of course, he was always around people because he was on the main road. That's where his best chance for business, well, in a sense, donations was. So we learn in verse 47, when he heard that that it was Jesus coming, because he heard the multitude, he heard the commotion coming, something was up. Something was up. This is kind of one of those stories, being at the right place at the right time. I remember I did a study one time on Jairus. Remember Jairus? His daughter was the one that was sick, and he worked in the temple. And of course, those in the Jewish religion at that time didn't like Jesus that much because he was a threat to their religion and their positions. But Jesus so happened to walk into town at the moment that his daughter was in her dying bed. And he knew that was the chance he had to take for the sake of his daughter, no matter what it cost him. No matter if others saw him coming to Jesus, humbling himself to Jesus, and I'm sure his other co-workers or other religious people saying, wait, what are you doing? Don't go to that guy. He's the one who's blaspheming God. He's saying he's the Son of God. But it took that encounter to save his daughter, the same as the woman with the issue of blood. If Jesus hadn't passed through that point of time where she was, remember, she was called unclean. How dare people told her, hey, get away. Leave him alone. You're unclean because, she had an issue with blood. And she didn't care. And if Jesus hadn't passed, she probably would have gone through her rest of the life with that issue, that health concern that she had. But it was that one encounter that made the whole difference in her life. And as we're going to see with Bartimaeus, it's going to make a big difference, that one encounter. So some of the questions we ask, okay, why did the Bible mention his name? And this, when I looking this up, it's interesting, and I even made a list. The Bible doesn't really name people who get healed. Jesus healed a man born blind. We don't know his name. He healed a man at Bethesda, in Mark 8:22. No name. He healed a paralytic at the pool of Bethesda. He healed the man that they were lowering down on a cot to Jesus, right? And I heard one commentator said maybe his name was Matt, but no, that get it, Matt. But no, it doesn't give his name. The woman we just talked about, the issue of blood, didn't give her name. Jesus even healed the mother of Peter's wife, no name. He healed a deaf mute in Decapolis, no name. He healed the centurion's servant. Remember that? And Jesus was in awe of the centurion's faith, but still no name of the man. He healed a man with a withered hand. He healed a man with dropsy. He healed the royal official's son. And a lot of these, there's no name given, but for this blind beggar, in the book of Mark, it gives his name. And it's interesting, right? Now, Bartimaeus is not really a name that like we used to hear Bob or Johnny or anything. Bar means son of, Timaeus, his father. So it's giving reference to actually the blind man's father, Timaeus. It even says son of Timaeus. So if we don't get all the names of all the people, why do we get his name? Why does the Bible feel the need to tell us his dad's name? That's interesting, right? And we may not know all the names of the people, but these we do. And the Bible does mention, say, like Jairus, who we just mentioned. He was an important religious ruler in the temple. There's another one, Gamaliel. He was a Jewish rabbi. And Nicodemus, it mentions Nicodemus' name, but a lot of other Pharisees, it doesn't mention their name, right? So, what is this telling us? And we can, we want to put pieces together. It could seem that he's telling us that these are names of important religious leaders of that time. So what it looks like Timaeus was maybe an important leader. And what does Bartimaeus call out to Jesus? Jesus, son of David. That's the first time in the Gospel of Mark that son of David is ever used. Have mercy on me. So, this is a very important note to take point, for us not to miss this point. This son of David, like when he healed the blind man sitting by the pool, that man didn't recognize who Jesus was. But right instantly, when he heard Jesus was that name, hey, Jesus is coming, he put that title with that person, Christ. Like, that's just not Christ, that's son of David. And the son of David is a messianic term to reference the Messiah, because he knew somehow that he had put the pieces together that this was the Messiah coming. Let's look at 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16. This is the messianic title. 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16. And when your days be filled, and you shall sleep with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, which shall proceed out of your bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I shall establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chastise him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. And my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. So all the Jews knew a Messiah was coming. The Old Testament gave many clues of his coming. But as we see what happened, throughout Christ's life, they didn't get it. They didn't see it. Jesus had come to reveal himself to the Jews, but they were spiritually blind. It's interesting, in Mark, and this is Mark 8, 27 through 30. Now this is the Mark 8 that I was talking about. Mark 8:27 through 30, we see Jesus asking his disciples the question, who do you say I am? Mark 8:27. Yeah. And Jesus went out and the disciples into the towns of Caesarea and Philippi. And by the way, he asked his disciples, saying to them, who do men say that I am? And they answered, John the Baptist, but some say Elijah, and others, one of the prophets. And he said to them, but whom say you that I am? And Peter answered and says to him, you are the Christ. And he charged him that they should not tell any man. In the book of Matthew, this is, you don't have to look it up, but Matthew 16:17, Jesus goes on further and telling them, blessed art thou, Peter, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed, nor, notice how it doesn't say taught you, has not revealed it to you, but my Father which is in heaven. God revealed it. And only Peter got it. And apparently the other disciples didn't. And they followed him all those other times. And, you know, it seems like they kept seeing him as a great prophet. But it took God to open Peter's eyes and reveal it. God had the key. God unlocked his eyes. But you notice how God didn't unlock the eyes of the Jews when he came. And that's a very interesting point. And I remember a couple of years ago, and I remember on a Sunday night, I gave a study on this part, that God came for the Jews. And we see how through the whole story and through the crucifixion, the Jews didn't know who he was, didn't recognize him for who they should have, because God gave them all the evidence, all the prophecies, and it was there. Just like it took 3 wise kings to know that Christ was coming through evidence of the star, and they followed it. The Jews were like 5 miles away in Jerusalem. They didn't get it. They didn't know he had even come. And yet it took foreigners to decipher all this from the word. And they put it together and they got it. So this is why at the cross, and of course this is just me, this is why at the cross, Jesus, when he prayed, he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They didn't know. They didn't know. Because it wasn't revealed to them. Because if it had been revealed to them, they would have set up Jesus as a king, physical king, and that's not what he came for. At least his first time, right? It was already set in motion. This was going to happen. And of course, God made it to happen the way he planned it. And so the Jews were blinded throughout this whole first coming of who he really was. But it doesn't mean others didn't recognize it. Even the woman at the well, when he just told her that little prophecy about, how many husbands she's had, and she, are you the Messiah? Are you the one we've been waiting for? Like, even she got it. But let's go back to Bartimaeus here. So, I have a point here about, remember John the Baptist, and I want to do a study on him one of these evenings. But John was the one coming to make way for the coming Christ. It seems like that was his whole purpose in life. He came to introduce Christ to the world, and then he kind of just faded away, right? And then, of course, we know the story. John the Baptist got arrested because he was criticizing Herod for marrying his brother's wife, and in jail, he kind of had doubts, and he had to ask his guys, hey, go ask Jesus, hey, are you the one? And they said, wait a minute, you just introduced him as a lamb, that taketh away the sin of the world, and now he has doubts. And what's interesting is how Jesus answered him. Jesus didn't say, yeah, I'm the one, I'm God. And you see a lot of videos online about Muslims when they're attacking Christians. Show me where Jesus said, I'm God. Show me that verse. And he doesn't say it like that. You have to dig. You have to, look at the scriptures, dig into the scriptures, and find where he does say he is God. He uses the term I am. When he's reading the Torah, and he says, this day has come, and they are going to take him to the edge of the cliff to push him over, because of blasphemy. And he said, for what sin? And they said, because you being a man, you're claiming to be God's son. That's blasphemous. God is one. He doesn't have a son. They didn't understand the whole meaning of it. So, back to John. So Jesus answers John the same way that the Old Testament gave clues about the Messiah. Okay, look what I've done. Let's go to Isaiah 35, 5 through 6. Isaiah 35, 5 through 6. It's interesting how Christ answered him. He didn't just come out and say, yep, it's me. 35, 5 through 6. And this is about, so then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert. By his actions, by his miracles of healing, were clues as to who he was. And that's how Jesus responded to him. He did heal people who were crippled. Take up your bed and walk. Remember that guy. The young man that was deaf, mute, with demons, he healed him. He healed several people that were blind. Not just blind Bartimaeus here in this story. So the Old Testament told the clues of what the Messiah was going to do that would reveal who he was. And that was the answer that John the Baptist got from Jesus. And I'm sure John the Baptist, when he got the message back, it's like, okay, I got it. That's right. That he reminded him of the Old Testament. So old blind Bart, he got it. And how did he get it? And being in the streets, he probably heard all the people talking in the streets, discussing, like we said, when you're blind, your hearing gets even more magnified than normal. Your body kind of compensates. So he could hear what people were saying. He heard the commotions of, after a miracle, people come through the town. Hey, this guy Jesus, he just opened the eyes of a blind guy or a paralytic guy down over here. Oh, maybe you heard about the feeding of the 5,000, or hey, it said that this Jesus, he stopped the winds and the waves with his command, or he walked on water. So he was hearing, I'm sure, all this commotion that he heard. Remember, he was around people all the time on the side of the road. Talking about many of the miracles, he could hear the ladies discussing, I'm sure, what had happened, And maybe he stopped some, hey, what's all the commotion about? And maybe they shared with him the stories that were happening. So the question of who Jesus is kind of one that we have to answer every day in what we talk about. You know, if we apply that same question that Jesus is saying, who do people say I am? Okay, that's one question, but who do you say I am? And we answer that in every choice, you know, if we really think about it, every action we make, we answer that question. Who do we say Jesus is? You know, when he asked the disciples, he was really asking, what is your revelation of who I am to you? And for us, you know, we answer that question with every thought, action, word. You know, if we're constantly talking about our troubles, our worries, our struggles, our fears, our problems, and yet claim Jesus is the Lord of our life, you know, what are we really saying of who Jesus is to us? How much bigger, or are we constantly telling people about how much bigger our God is than our problems? Telling everybody that Jesus is bigger than our stress, our issues, or our worries? Then what are we saying about Jesus? You know, you see the difference? We live based on how, to us, Jesus is revealed as. You know, who's bigger, our problems, or is Jesus bigger than our problems, our issues? In 2 Corinthians 4:4, it tells you about what is the eyesight of the sinner like. Second Corinthians 4:4 says, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is in the image of God, should shine on them. So, like in the Sunday school class this morning, we were talking about how, you know, we're at war. You know, we need to be soldiers. We have an enemy out there. And this enemy is constantly trying to blind mankind with social media, with TV, anything that can distract us away from God. So back to Bartimaeus. Why would it refer to Jesus as Son of God? Of course, if his father, you know, because it mentions his name, was a religious leader, he must have read the Torah to his son, since his son couldn't read, being blind, right? So he must have heard it over years and years and over again. And like we're talking about the prophecies that would conclude that this man passing by is the coming Messiah, son of David. And here he is right in his midst at the moment. And he wasn't going to let lose his opportunity. You know, think about people in hell. And I would think in the afterlife, you're going to have a perfect memory. So those already lost in hell are going to remember all the missed times that maybe the gospel was on TV or on the radio, or preached. Maybe they went to a church and say, well, okay, now I'll do that later. You know, not right now. I'm having too much fun. But I'll come to God one of these days. And they didn't. How that would bug you, you know, like it bugs me that I didn't invest in Apple when it was $9. You know that feeling where, man, you had a missed opportunity. I remember in college, I majored in finance, so there's a thing called opportunity cost, and it's for managers or people working in investments, and they use it in formulas, and it's actually the cost of not taking an opportunity. It has value. You know, we can apply it. Okay, by you not investing in Tesla when it was $2, you have opportunity cost of $10 million that you could have had. That opportunity cost you. You had the opportunity to do it, you didn't do it. So those people in hell had the opportunity to take the gospel, take that word that they heard, somebody shared with them, but they didn't take it. And I'm sure that's going to bug them for eternity. It's just going to keep playing over and like, oh, man, I could have had it. I could have been out of here. I could have, come to Jesus, but I didn't, And it hurts more when you can't go back and change, sometimes you want to go back in time and undo a mistake you did or something. But this is the biggest one mistake anybody can commit is rejecting the gospel. Okay, now let's summarize what this little what we get out from this little story. So Bartimaeus, he knew that Christ, Jesus, was the key to his healing, this son of David who was coming. And who knows that if he had tried, like the woman, the issue of blood, that he had gone to doctors or he had gone to other people to pray for him and nothing happened and nothing worked. So never had he got the opportunity, because Jesus, his popularity was very big in that time, because as you notice, he's coming through Jericho, it didn't say it's just a multitude. It says a great multitude was coming with him. So this was big, kind of like, if Trump were to come to a little town, everybody's going to come out of the woodwork to meet this prominent person, in our society. And here he was coming down the one street, think about how many streets that were in Jericho and that he had a spot, maybe his favorite spot, to beg from. And Jesus is on that street. He could have gone down to any other street. This is one of those times, just like many encounters in the Bible, where it was just kind of meant to be for this man. And another point is, he ignored the opinions of others. When he heard it was Jesus, he yelled out to Jesus. And what did the people around him do at first? Be quiet. Hey, don't bother the guy. Leave him alone. He didn't let others intimidate him. I remember, you remember that Pastor Greg Laurie, he just had a movie out called, I think, Revolution or something like that. I remember him telling the story of when he was young, he'd come into the house, and he was getting into the Word and everything, and his mother was not a believer. He had to leave his Bible outside in the bushes before he went inside. And then he'd get it later and go study, with his friends or whatever. And there was one time when his mom found it in the bushes. And she's like, hey, whose is this? And he kind of sheepishly said, Mom, that's mine. But he didn't let her opposition or dislike for Christians or Christianity stop him. He kept going. So that's what the crowd was trying to do. Telling him, hey, don't make a fool of yourself. The master doesn't have time for you. But still Bartimaeus was determined to have his sight. And now was the best time, because he knew the one who could do it was close by. He knew. He had put it all together. How many other blind people missed their chance to see because they didn't shout out to Jesus as he passed by? Because other people told him, hey, be quiet. And they did. And, Christ didn't. Kept going. It takes our action to come to Jesus. He'll come by us, But we have to put the action, come to him. Come into me, all you are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is light. Come. I mean, verb right there. Come. You have to come. He'll meet you halfway. You got to come. So, Bartimaeus was determined. It didn't matter. He wasn't afraid of rebuke or criticism from others. That didn't stop him. He was super determined. There's a story of Jesus casting out demons, and the people had marveled, and they had mentioned, "Wow, could this be the son of David?" Like, their eyes were starting to open. And what is in that story of Jesus delivering the demons from this young man? But the Pharisees were quick to shout out, "No, that's from Beelzebub." So here, Satan is using the Pharisees to damp out the light that these people were just starting to get revelation. Hey, this guy could be the Messiah. And here the Pharisees, no, he's just devil, he's Beelzebub. So the people let that put their fire out. Next point, Bartimaeus exercised his faith. One of our memory verses not so long ago was Hebrews 11:6. By faith pleases God. And this man had his faith. Because if you notice in the story, he's got his healing instantaneously. In another instance, let me see if I wrote that down. Yeah, let's look at Mark 8:22. This is another blind man who was healed. And let's look at how it differs from how Bartimaeus got his healing. Mark 8:22. And he came to Bethesda, and they bring a blind man to him and besought him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him, did he see anything? And he looked up and he said, I see men as trees walking. That means he had a little vision, but it was still blurry. He saw men look like trees to him, like he couldn't really make them out. And after he put his hands again upon his eyes and made him look up, and he was restored and saw every man clearly. So this blind man, when Jesus had asked him, hey, what do you want? He asked him to touch him. Bartimaeus didn't ask him for touch. He didn't need the touch. Jesus even tells him, your faith made you whole. Just like the woman who touched the hem of his garment. Jesus said, your faith made you whole. This man's faith was in his touch. So Jesus touched him, touched his eyes. And for some reason, it took 2 times to get it a perfect healing. But not for Bartimaeus. His was instantaneous. Just as was the woman with the issue of the blood. Instantaneous, because of her great faith. Okay. So Jesus had told him, thy faith have made you whole. Not his persistence, not his righteousness, and not even his social standing, which was none really for him. He was just a beggar on the side of the road. So Bartimaeus, he risked being ridiculed, but above and beyond that, he expected to be healed. Above that, he didn't care about the ridicule. Of course, faith is experiencing it to happen. He had to follow through, though. And you notice that Jesus didn't come to him. Jesus said, come. Let me go back to the story. It says that he arose, throwing aside his garment, he arose and came to Jesus. Now, I think in another gospel, it calls it his cloak, which in those days was very important. It was like a blanket, kind of a coat, and maybe that's where he even laid out on the street to collect his money. So that was his whole life. I mean, I think in Deuteronomy, a man's cloak or garment could be used for collateral, but you had to give it to him back by the end of the night, or the end of the day. Isn't that weird? Because he couldn't go out to sleep without it. You know, that was his blanket. That was his. You know, he carried it around wherever he went. But he cast everything off and went to Jesus. And of course, that's kind of symbolic. Is like, hey, when you come to Jesus, you got to leave all your old stuff behind. You don't need it. You got Jesus. What do you need all that old stuff for anymore? You know, your old life. You know, his life changed in an instant, in a matter of maybe a minute or two, from one direction to another. Just like Joseph this morning, we're learning. In one day, he's in jail. The next minute, he's on the throne, on the right hand of Pharaoh, of the greatest nation on earth at that time. In one day. I mean, that's crazy. And this man now, he can see. So in coming to Jesus, he just threw everything off and came to Jesus. I don't need anything else. I just need you. And as we see in the last verse, Jesus tells him, go thy way, your faith has made you well. So he immediately received his sight. But what did he do? Did he go his way? No. Kind of like the 10 lepers that got healed, and only one came back to thank Jesus. Only one. Another 9, hey, you know, their whole, it's kind of like what we talked about this morning, how, you know, your riches can drown you out for the need of God, because everything's so comfortable, everything's going right, you know, and that's when God says, hey, don't forget where all that came from. So but in a show of gratitude, he followed Jesus. He said, hey, I'm with you. I'm going with you. You're all I need. And that was that's a great compliment to, and he could have gone off on his own and done whatever he wanted, but he knew the source. And in realizing that this was the son of David, this was the Messiah, and he got what he wanted his whole life, is to get his eyesight back. He stuck with Jesus. And I wonder how long, or what happened to him after, you know, crucifixion and everything. Did he go on with the other disciples later on in Paul and Peter? You know, did he stay with the church? And I would think so. He seemed like a pretty smart guy who got this revelation when so many others didn't. So he became a follower of Christ. That's the last point. He showed continuing faith in Christ. Jesus is not content to be just a crisis counselor. He wants to be our ever-present companion and a friend. And he is there in times of crisis, but he's also just as real when we are unaware of his presence. So, probably many of us here aren't blind physically, but many in this world are blind spiritually. And we were talking this morning in Sunday school that there's a battle going on. There's a spiritual battle, and we don't really see it, but we know it's there. And if you don't believe it's there, then you've already lost your end of the battle. Because the verse where we wrestle against not flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and high places. It is a battle. It's a daily battle. And of course, we were talking about this morning also about putting on the armor to be ready for that battle. And about feeding on the word to keep us strong. As an athlete drinks protein powder and eats right, we have to eat right every day too. You know, there's a lot of mess out there that we could be ingesting on a daily basis that man has to offer. But this is the best protein powder for a Christian spirit, you know, that we can take. I think I went a little too far. I think that's about it. Well, from that little story, you know, there's a lot, and there's a lot more points I could have, but I had to kind of narrow it down. And there's a lot to glean from that one little story, and it's so interesting how blind Bartimaeus got what he wanted, and how he had insight when, even though he had no eyesight, you know, he figured it out. God blessed him with that insight. It revealed to him, you know, through the scriptures, but he got it when others didn't get it. Okay, I guess I'll do the announcements. Okay, coming up next is Wednesday, 7 o'clock, our Wednesday service on Revelation. Oh, there it goes. Thursday, we have our men's meeting, our women's meeting, our children's and youth meeting at 7 o'clock, Thursdays. And we've been kind of growing pretty good on at least the men part to have. Saturday, we have our our prayer meetings, 4:30. You can come to the church. You can join us through Zoom. If you have any needs, you know, please, you know, share them. If you want to help pray for others, please join us. And Sunday mornings at 10, we have our adult Bible class at 10 a.m. And we have a children's youth class at 10 as well. And then our main service is at 11. And we're going through the book of Genesis right now. We hope you all can join us. So our memory verse is the verse. Like, this is, you can sum up the whole Bible in just this one verse. You know, the love of God in the only way. You know, I remember the first night, pastor called me on a Wednesday night, and I had never taught anything. You know, I had just started coming, and he said, "Oh, I can't come. You know, can you do it for me?" And I said, "Okay, I guess, you know, I'll put something." You know, I had never done any, and I did it on John 3:16. I made a whole study of it, and there's so many little parts that, you know, you could just make a whole lesson on it. So John 3:16. Let's read it together. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And the point I want to point out, because it says, whosoever believes. It doesn't say, whosoever does works, whosoever tithes, whosoever joins the right religion. No. It's just whosoever believes. Whosoever baptizes is saved. No. No, it's not even mentioned. Just like the thief on the cross that you were talking, you know, Dale, your favorite character, he didn't get baptized. He didn't give any tithing. He didn't do any works for God. Yet he made it. You know, he made it. But man wants to keep putting conditions on salvation. You know, Satan wants to make it jump through hoops when it's really that simple. Okay, let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this study on blind Bartimaeus, Lord. Lord, help us to have the insight that he got. Help us to have the learning, the putting together the prophecies and your word and come to the right conclusions as he did, and to have the enthusiasm and the emotion to come to Christ, Lord, knowing that Christ has what we need, even when we don't know what we need. He has it. Lord, and help us not to let others drown us out. Keep us from getting our blessing from you, Lord. Keep us hungry for you. Keep us hungry for your word. And in Jesus' holy name we pray.